Probably one of the best golf coaches to ever do it, for Sean Foley.
I was a punching bag during my time with Tiger Woods, and I started with Tiger almost 10 months after his life fell apart.
He hit a fire hydrant. He hit a tree. He was semi-conscious or unconscious for a number of minutes. His wife used a golf club to bash in the back window to rescue him.
At first, the criticism took me what I had to tap into was the fact that I took a job with the most famous person in the world after it's showing us that he doesn't have life figured out. And then I, in my mind, thought that I was going to be able to bring him to a level he hadn't been at before. That's arrogance. That's ego. I just think that we have to be obsessed by growth. And you got one chance at life, right? Everyone wants to improve. They just don't know how to get there. We're all good at what we're passionate about, and that can get you to become very good. But to become great is normally going to be a 1-to-1 ratio on the discipline you have to probably do the things you don't want to do. When we talk about the mental side, people think that's self-belief, confidence. I don't agree with that. Do I think positivity is helpful? I don't. Do I think negativity is hurtful? I do. I think the key in life to be successful is
Welcome to Optimize Outcomes. I'm your host, Paul Fulford, and I'm extremely excited about somebody that we're bringing on today. He's a friend of mine, but more importantly, he's just a wealth of resources and an amazing human being. Could be considered, I would say, probably one of the best golf coaches to ever do it. Mr. Sean Foley. Sean has worked with the likes of Tiger Woods and Justin Rose and Lydia Ko. He's got a young stable of athletes now, like Cameron Champ. He also works with, Fortune 500 CEOs and celebrities. And he's somebody that understands things not just understands things at a certain level, but looks at things from a different perspective that I just find welcoming and just so fresh on how he's able to open my mind on a regular basis. So I'm really excited to introduce to our audience, Sean Foley. So Sean, recently there's been a lot of discussion around mental and physical endurance and performance, especially in the golf world, your world, where it's skewing younger, where you've got a lot of your stable's very young now. And how are these athletes now handling it? I mean, it's more of a sport now, right? Definitely. I mean, it's not that it ever wasn't, but there's a lot more that goes into the physical, and I know you're big into the mental. So how do you see that evolving in the game currently?
Yeah, I think that when the word mental is a tricky word, right? Because it's so encompassing. So what's wrong with people mentally, so to speak? And so I struggle with the word mental because when I think of mental issues, I think of schizophrenia. I think of people who hear 7 voices in their head. I think of troops who've come back from war who have PTSD. So these are things out of our control, right? And so much of the processes of the brain, I think that in a lot of sports and stuff, in performance, sports psychologists have always been the metric. Whereas to me, I've tried to more study neuroscience, evolutionary biology, and primatology. So understand why the brain is the way it is, understand how human beings are interpreting experiences based on how the brain and the senses are going to work, right? So, I think the deeper understanding is to recognize kind of the evolution of the brain and to realize that we are pre-coded to remember the bad. We're pre-coded to detect threat. We're pre-coded to douse ourselves in fear because we are only here to survive and reproduce. So to become someone who can thrive, what does that mean? So to be able to go from a survivor mentality to a thriving mentality, what does that look like? So when you look at, depression and anxiety, which in first world country like United States, the numbers are off the chart.
Yeah, especially now, right?
Higher
than ever.
Especially now. Yeah. So you could argue right now is probably the best time to be alive as a human being. Our life expectancy is higher. Our ability to get food is higher, water. So regardless of what CNN and Fox are saying and how they try to generate, division, obviously, so we click on, right? Breaking news is an obvious thing. So breaking news is going to tap into the dopaminergic system, and then we're going to watch, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, the hurricane that just hit, there was meteorologists crying on a Tuesday of what was going to happen. Now, it was obviously super traumatic and has affected a lot of people. We can't argue with that. But it was the end of times on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so we attach to those things quite quickly, right? So when you look at at human existence, what are some of the things that are guaranteed to make you psychologically function better, cognitively function better, right? Exercise, sunlight, sleep, companionship, purpose. So if you're missing those 5, you're going to struggle, right? And because we live in a capitalistic system, so much of the bias of how we should live is based on this idea of consumption and attainment, right? So cars, clothes, social ladders, houses, boats. Well, anybody who has a private jet who's depressed is just depressed in a private jet. So when we look at the studies based on happiness, the studies based on purpose, it isn't a whole lot different than it was 300,000 years ago. So, with the advent of people like Huberman, who talks about early morning sunlight, well, our ancestors would have always had early morning sunlight because as soon as we woke up, we'd have to go and work so that we could eat and that we could continue to survive.
Right.
Cold water.
Yeah.
How long has it been in society since we've been able to take a hot shower? So much of our physiology now relates to comfort. But that's not what it needs, right? It needs to be pushed. So I think when we talk about the mental side, people think that's self-belief, confidence. I don't agree with that. Patience. Patience is a virtue because it is a consequence of a deeper understanding. So you and I fly all the time. We travel all the time. I don't get upset in airports. I expect the airport to be a shit show every time I go in one.
Yeah.
So when people are like, man, you're so patient. How can you be so patient? No, I already expect that it's going to be a shit show. I already expect that the flight's going to be delayed. I already expect that people are going to be stressed and rude. I already expect that no one at TSA wants to actually do that job. So for me, when it goes well, it's like, oh, that was nice. And when it doesn't, it's like, all right.
So how is that different from like setting up, like prepare, like almost it being that you're preparing to fail versus it being that you expect something, right? Like how is that, how do you balance that cerebrally?
Well, I just think that if you know it for what it is, right? So if you get into a discussion with people, understanding that a lot of what they are going to tell you come from a belief system that comes from indoctrination, that comes from domestication, that comes then from conditioning, then I'm not as affected with someone that I disagree with, knowing that I know what I know based on the experiences I've had, based on the books I've read, based on the people who've mentored me. They're coming from the same place. So for me, yelling at them about their conditioning is the wrong way to be. So, as it relates to this idea of like the 7 habits of highly effective people, I think most of those things are consequences of a deeper understanding.
So how do you balance that with it being this preconditioned or this indoctrination that somebody's had previously when you're coaching, right? When you're trying to help somebody push through something like, earlier we were chatting before we got started here and you were coaching someone, right? And these were some of the topics you were discussing with that person, right? How do you help somebody understand that those are the things that are burdensome or weighing them down or limiting, when you're coaching them?
Yeah, I think it's always going to come from your own personal experience because we're not unique, right? When people say human beings are unique and we're very different, we're just not. The spice on our chicken may be, but for the most part, the dynamics of humanity are the same. So, for example, like if somebody likes baggy jeans and someone likes skinny jeans, those are styles. The dynamic is their denim. Okay, right. Someone likes brownies, someone likes chocolate chip cookies. The dynamic is sugar. So what is the dynamic within human beings? And I think what like weather tragedies and things like that show us that we're all quite connected, right? So when push comes to shove, love is normally the default mechanism in humanity. All right.
It should be, right?
It should be, but once again, that's because we were domesticated towards love. So I think that the imperative part is that whenever I work with anybody, whenever I see anyone on any given day, regardless of financial means, regardless of attractiveness, regardless of clothing, regardless of anything, I could definitely hedge my bet that that person I'm sitting with is wounded.
Mm-hmm.
That person I'm sitting with is destructive to themselves, as I have been.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is like, we're all fucked up. I just admit it and work on it.
Right.
And I think that that's the big part, is that the ability to talk about what you're going through is really important. So people look at pro golfers on TV and say, these guys fly on private jets. They get to play golf for a living. These are people who play golf for enjoyment on the weekend. Go and play golf for 30 days in a row, right? Go and travel from Shanghai to LA. So what we're dealing with golf is not physically that taxing, but from a neural fatigue standpoint, it's very, very taxing. And so when we get to the point where we don't have the ability to, when people talk about, grit and resilience, oh, well, then how is that trained? And you can't just, I can read a book on grit, but I've almost had to grow up with the right amount of trauma to understand what that is. So growing up in the ghetto might be too much, but growing up in privilege might not be enough. So what is the right? I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but what is the right amount of trauma? But what I understand about me being resilient is that I love what I do for a living. I have a lot of purpose in it. When I'm helping people improve, I'm improving myself. So it looks like resilience and it looks like grit, but it's just not. That's just the wrong word.
So how do you train something like that, right? Like, I know for me, I cold plunge in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I don't like cold plunging.
No, who does?
But I do it. And, I think mentally for me, it's just because I start out doing my day doing something I don't want to do, so that as much as I understand the benefits of it for me, it's just that mental thing for me. Again, mental being
but I get it. The word's fine.
Right. Is that I can push through that, then I can push through whatever the rest of my day is going to throw at me, right? I started my day out doing something I didn't want to do. And to me, and again, having you being a friend and having multiple conversations with you many times, how do you grow if you just sit in your comfort zone all the time, right? Is that what you find is a big roadblock in what you do on a regular basis, is people get comfortable, and whether it's coming from one side of the tracks or the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have to go through maybe this self-induced trauma for growth, or how do you approach that?
Well, I think as it relates to like doing difficult things, right? Like we're all good at what we're passionate about, and that can get you to become very good. But to become great is normally going to be a 1-to-1 ratio on the discipline you have to probably do the things you don't want to do. I love a lot of things about parenting, and there's things I do not like about parenting.
Mm-hmm.
But to be a great dad, I have to be able to do both,
Mm-hmm.
right? So as it relates to like waking up, and whether it's, a cold plunge or a cold shower, one, you're doing something you don't want to do, but in most cases, it's the benefits that come from those things. So the fact that I'm going to release more dopamine. So what does cold water do more than anything? Yeah, we can think we mentally push through something we don't want to do, but from a physiological level, we are inherently going to be in a better mood for the rest of the day.
1,000%.
And the important part about mood is that there's really, like, life is inside out. So how I'm feeling within myself at any moment is going to be directly projected, onto the screen of life.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm in a good mood, nothing bothers me. If I'm in a shit mood, I get $100 and it gets taxed, and I'm pissed that it gets taxed. So recognizing that I need to do things that guarantee that I will be in a better mood. And being in a better mood is not being in a bad mood and someone telling you to cheer up. No one wants to be in a bad mood, right? But if all you do is eat saturated fats and you don't sleep and you're on your screen too much, you're guaranteed to be in a bad mood.
So it starts with a plan. It starts with awareness, right?
As everything does.
And then it starts with a plan. And I hear you talk a lot about where do you want to be in 3, 4, 5 years from now, right? So is it something that you think has to be, I mean, even physically written in front of you, like on the mirror? Are these things that you need to do like as mantras every day? Like how do you incorporate something like that into just a regular state of being to like break a habit or break a way of being?
I just think that we have to be obsessed by growth, and you got one chance at life, right? You're not going to do it right. You're going to make a million mistakes. Okay. So you can either utilize these mistakes, one, to delve into depression. What's wrong with me? Why do I continuously do this? I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, right? And so many of I am this started with my second grade teacher, who said, Sean, you know what? You're very good at reading and speaking, but you're not good at math. Well, that was me all the way through high school. I'm just not good at math, right? So it was almost an out, right? Now, from a brain standpoint, I could technically not be good at math. Doesn't mean I can't improve at it.
Correct.
But the idea is like, all the mistakes that we make, I think the key in life to be successful is being an expert at failure, because we're going to do it all the time. And so how do I become an expert at something I'm going to do all the time? So is that to make it deep into my limbic system? Whereas whenever I think about that thing, then I administer chemicals into my system that aren't going to allow me to do anything. Or do I look at it from a thing of introspection and reflection? And so, you can sit in a room with couples knowing there's discussions they need to have with one another that they're not. And that absence of that discussion makes everything on the surface look like everything's okay, but the energy's wrong. You can feel it. And so they need to be truthful with one another. And I think that the things that go unsaid in relationships, and I'm including the relationship you have with yourself, affect it more than things that go said. So being able to be introspective and reflective is very, very important, because most likely you're the reason that you are succeeding or failing.
And it's that self-talk, right? Like, I know that if I'm having one of those days, right, where things aren't going the way that I planned, and if I start saying things like, I'm an idiot, I'm so stupid, or like,
here we go again.
Here we go. Yeah, right.
Oh, that's about right.
It just seems to be this snowball effect.
Of course, like because you're going to manifest the destiny based on the language. So, I got a buddy, and every time something happens that isn't in his favor, he goes, yeah, that's about right. And I'm like, dude, you basically, with your language, all you do is look for things to not go your way.
Right. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
You think the universe is picking you, that your flight's delayed? How about you and 10 million other people in the world right now? Right. So I think that it's not that I don't have these thoughts. I'm just aware I'm having them. And then I recognize that they're just thoughts. So if you look at the brain as just the universe, right? All these thoughts are just planets and stars. But the best part, like even about a star, is the one we see at night, it burned out like 1 million years ago. So even if it feels real, and even if it seems real, it's not. It's just a mental construct of a previous experience. Understanding that construct comes from a time where you were trying to protect yourself. So it's going to remember. Like when I talk to my players on the phone after a round of golf, they never tell me about the good things they did. So I think when I'm able to teach them a little bit more about, like, this is your brain. Now, even the great brain experts that I've read or listened to, even they say that they're guessing, but at least it's better than what I previously thought. Right. So like, do I think positivity is helpful? I don't. Do I think negativity is hurtful? I do. Because.
So explain that. So
if one of my players, and we look at all the data that they have, right, of where they're at in their game, being positive isn't going to help their driver play. There's obviously a misunderstanding they have with that part of the game that's leading us to where we're at. Okay. But being negative is going to hurt it. But being positive to me sometimes is just spraying cologne on dog shit. It's still dog shit. It just smells better. So, if a guy's down and out on his luck, he just got a divorce, he's just got fired, and someone says, you need to be more positive, I don't think that's going to help him at all. He needs to recognize, okay, of the actions of what I'm responsible for, what have I done that allowed this to occur.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he might have had a boss who just didn't like him because he reminded him of a guy in high school that liked the girl that he liked.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows why people react the way they do. All right.
So you look at a guy on tour that like Terrell Hatton, who has pretty animated if he gets upset, right? What do you think that does to the rest of his round? Like, is it good to get it out, or how does that compound, or does it?
Repression always turns into perversion,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So it's like I'm in Utah last week,
Yeah.
right? And the rules on drinking are very strict.
Mm-hmm.
But Utah also has the highest addiction rate to pharmaceutical drugs. But guess what? It doesn't feel as bad because a doctor said yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then think about, in our professions dealing with many doctors are domestically given a lot of credit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a doctor. Ooh, you're a doctor. Because we all grew up and people were like, you should be a doctor. 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 And just think about the amount of faith that we give to a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy who finishes last in med school is still called a doctor.
Yep.
So it's about really challenging what the doctor's saying, because you have to understand at this point that the doctor in many cases is an extension of the pharmaceutical industrial complex. So is he going to really deeply look at where my inflammation is coming from, or is he going to prescribe me something to get rid of it?
I've said this before with different panels I've moderated, or, on different Zoom meetings or whatever it is. It's not rocket science what makes a good doctor great. The biggest difference is, at least I've seen, is that the ones that are great, they give a shit. It's more than just Band-Aids or blinders on. It's opening up their perspective, right? It's asking those third, fourth, fifth questions, getting to the root cause of things. Physically, and again, like we've just been talking about, mentally, right? It's got to be the same way, where it's like there's that 7-year-old that you're talking about in 7th grade that was damaged that you've got to deal with, because that 7-year-old is still making those decisions for you in a lot of cases.
And especially as it relates to men, we tend to act emotionally from the place of our first major trauma. So that's probably 12 or 13 or 14,
Mm-hmm.
which is why we still have grown men who run countries who are bombing children. Okay. To me, if that doesn't show the nature, even though 94% of our brain is directly correlated to a chimp, even animals aren't like that. Like, we're the most deadly species on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what do? We go, well, this book said this way back then, and that's why I'm doing this now. So it's okay. I don't need to challenge the book because that's blasphemous. Okay. This is the word of God, whatever that means. Right. And to each his own on that stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Right. But I don't want you to tell me what you believe. I want to be able to watch you and know you do.
Right.
Okay. I want to know you do. And as I would say, as that relates to me living in America, which is mostly a Christian country, I'm not seeing the Christ-like behavior wherever I look.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just not seeing it.
But especially at the airport, you're not, right? We see the worst of people at the airport.
I mean, with a cross on, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying that it's easy to be that way, but if you tell me that you are that, then I'm going to demand in your example that you are that, not just you in a good mood telling me what you would do. How are you reacting from the worst place that you have? And to me, I just think that at the end of my life, if somebody said to me, all the success on top of way more failure, but just the success, the business, the trophies, the wins, the acknowledgments, what was the most important thing the whole time? It was just having love for everybody. Like that to me feels abundant. And I know that within my own issues that I have with myself, that most of I'm not responsible for, then I know the person that I disagree with on almost everything, it's the same type of thing.
Do you feel like, I know with the different things that I've worked on in my life, or different people I've worked with in my life, that, and being a coach in, my realm in a lot of ways, it's helped me. I feel like working with particular clients or individuals, or, working alongside of other people, that it's helped elevate my game in a lot of ways, right?
Of course.
You've worked with, you work with a lot of different golfers currently, and celebrities alike. You've worked with Tiger in the past, right? You were Tiger's coach for quite a few years. How did working alongside like Tiger Woods and Justin Rose, right? How do you feel like that helped you elevate your game even, right? Like you were working with them to help them with their game, but do you feel like there was an aspect of it where it helped you elevate yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but I think it all comes down to just being asked the right question,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's the question that's going to articulate the depth of the answer. So, but how do we live, right?
Mm-hmm.
How's your day? Good, right? As soon as I get into a discussion with someone and they start with, wow, the weather's excellent, I'm like, man, this guy does not even want to be in this discussion with me. These are just the niceties that we have as human beings, because as so much, the region of our brain, the limbic system, is so tribally based. I mean, just look at what's going on with the election. I mean, the stuff that people are
It's
actually,
always about like bad mouthing versus like what's going to actually be done if somebody gets elected.
and the scariest part to me is not really the people saying it. It's the people going, yeah, you're right. And it's like, wow, you literally want to be petulant and upset. And it's all based in ignorance. So for example, like my 13-year-old son thinks
Mhm.
my 16-year-old son's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the 19-year-old kid who lives next door thinks my 16-year-old kid's not that impressive,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you're around high performers, you get to look at kind of what they do. But the thing is, we all have to find the way we can perform. So I have players who really need to feel that off the course, everything is settled in order for them to play well on the course.
Mm-hmm.
Then I have other players where it's almost that the chaos of their life is what sharpens their focus.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on who, but that person has to be real. The problem is the person who is more of the alpha and the apex, society doesn't like that, even though they run society. So then comes the brand, then comes the image. And the thing is, when you're trying to be two different people, you're not going to be that effective. So I think that a lot of the people that I see who are really successful, and I don't mean monetary based, I mean successful meaning they wake up excited to live, and when they go to sleep at night, when their head hits the pillow, they fall asleep. All right? I find that most of those people don't care how they're perceived by others. And if they do, it's like 3 or 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
So as it relates to me and all the criticism that I've got in my career, the only person who could criticize me where I would pay attention would be my wife, would be my dad,
Mm-hmm.
would be my mom, maybe not even my brother, because he's got holdups within himself as it relates to us growing up in the same house,
Mm-hmm.
right? So those are the only people who really have validity in expressing something towards me, because I know that their agenda is only love. So when I'm out on the road and I'm getting complimented and people are taking selfies with me and I put my arm around them and I can feel their heart racing, that makes me giggle. And so I was with a young coach who was following me one day, and he started out the day of saying, like, Mr. Foley, this is what I want to do for a living. I want to be like you. And I said, well, why don't you just start with being the best version of yourself? And he's like, yeah, but you've kind of given me a vision of what that may look like. I'm like, and others have given me that vision.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. By the end of the day, he was like, wow, that was a lot. He was like, but it must make you feel good when people say all these nice things to you. And I'm like, no, but it doesn't. So when someone says, I'm your biggest fan ever, and they've just met you,
Mm-hmm.
like, how should that provide you with anything? Just like the guy who goes, Foley, I think you suck. Okay, that's cool.
Same.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I know what I am and I know what I'm not.
Obviously, we are, like you said, our experience, right?
Yeah.
What happened for you to really take hold of that realization, right? That you are who you are, right? Like, I think that, look, again, we're, the podcast is called Optimize Outcomes, right? And, you are at a certain point. Again, I think you're like me, where I set goals, and then once I achieve those goals, those are the norm. So I have to set more goals now, right? So how does somebody understand who they are and understand that they can change or optimize, right? Like what happened for you for that realization to take hold?
Yeah, well, I think it's more of understanding what you're not.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? I think it's understanding what you're not. So in 2013 was my best year financially to that point.
Mm-hmm.
It was my worst year personally.
Mm-hmm.
That's not me.
Mm-hmm.
That is definitely not me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. To gain the world, to lose my soul is something that it just, I have no interest in that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think it starts with that. So I knew at that point that what I was doing was not me, because I wasn't willing to lose that other part. So I knew in that moment that's more important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there may be CEOs out there who were like, you know what, my job's more important than my family. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong. There's a right or wrong for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of that year, if I went, this is it, this is what I'm about, wins and accolades and being the best, then so be it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't. So I knew at that point, okay, that's definitely not you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I think it's more about like even the golf swing, for example, it's very complex.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say right now, after 30 years of coaching and 20 years of coaching the best players in the world, that I know what's right, but I know exactly what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so normally when people are coming to me,
Mm-hmm.
they have a misinterpretation or understanding of what they're trying to do. Okay. So they're trying to do something that their right glute doesn't do anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like as we strip away the fat, everyone has a six pack. So it's almost about alleviating.
It's under there, right?
It's under there.
Yeah.
So the potential for all of us to have, like, I like the word mental wealth better than mental health, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like the word brain health better than mental health, because a lot of the issues that we're having is in a vertical structure of physics leading to chemistry leading to biology. So what's biologically wrong with me starts with physics. So sedentary, not good, right? Constant blue light, not good. Not sleeping, not good. So the chemistry that's affecting my biology is driven by something before it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I approach it with a client of, he's come to me because he's not hitting it well. Okay. But what he was doing was what he thought was going to help him hit it well.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as he starts saying, this is what I've been doing, I'm like, well, that's not how physics works. That's not how geometry works. That's not how human movement works.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, oh, he's almost better now. You know what I mean? So if somebody told you, look, in order to lose weight, I want you to eat 5 times a day, high carb content. I want you to eat right before you go to sleep, and then wake up at 3 a.m. and eat again. No one is losing weight. Not ever. Not ever.
Especially, I mean, proven.
Yeah. So with golf, I tried to look at the same types of things. So how have I done that? I have consulted and spent a lot of money investing in my understanding by having data and measurement in the tools that I use, but then being around smarter people than me all the time. So what I've always felt like I've been able to do is break down complex ideas with the help of many mentors to put it into a position that someone not as passionate about me as understanding that will be able to apply it to what they do and improve. Because it really is just about improvement. And, there's the saying we've heard a million times a day, 1% better a day, 1% better a day. I think the problem with the direction of society is that, you can't improve your golf swing like you can order something on Amazon. This shit does not deliver the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So in many ways, consumption has become so easy that we are losing the ability to realize that it's very difficult to improve.
Well, you say you use wealth, and I like that word because wealth signifies investing, right? Like you've had to do something to invest to get there, right?
Perfect. That how you said that is absolutely. I'll absolutely steal that the next time I talk about this. But that's it. Like, I'm 50, right? How old are you?
44.
Oh, you're young.
Still,
Let me guide you,
yeah,
young
yeah.
one. Right? From 44 to 50, it gets
Yeah,
way different.
yeah.
I'm joking, but kind of. I think the greatest thing that I've ever been called to this point is daddy. No doubt.
Yeah.
How many times was I focusing on my career in a way to obviously provide them with all the opportunities they'll need?
Mm-hmm.
But my dad provided me with an opportunity to play golf. You know what that was? He took me to a range and I got a job cleaning clubs. And then I got a job picking the range.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a job parking carts. And then I got a job cutting greens. So it was obvious by the time I was 22 and decided this is what I wanted to do. This was like one of the loves of my life.
Mhm.
How could I suck at it?
Mhm.
I couldn't possibly. I just loved it too much. I'm very curious. I enjoy watching people grow, and I like being right. So when people ask me, why do you do it? I ask players all the time when they come to me, why do you play golf? And there's this 2-minute silence.
They don't know. Or
They don't
can't
know.
articulate it.
They don't know. And so I'll take purpose and meaning over happiness and positivity any day of the week. Because the fact of the matter is, like, when you look back, and in a book that I would advise everyone to read if they haven't, at least the first chapter is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Yep,
right?
I love that book.
Because he was a psychotherapist and psychiatrist who was a Jewish, who was a prisoner
Mm-hmm.
in Auschwitz.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's a guy whose whole life has been studying the human experience. Well, now he's in the ultimate petri dish to do that,
Mm-hmm.
which is pure survival. And the things that men in his camp were able to endure with the vision of seeing their daughter and son and wife again
Mm-hmm.
are, you can't understand it. And to find out that as soon as they found out that their family had been exterminated, they died in 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
But they had things that the medical community would say, you cannot live with this.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the purpose? And if your purpose is to make the most money in the world, so be it. If your purpose is to be the best family man you can be, so be it. If your purpose is to be the fittest you can be, so be it. But just understanding that if your purpose is to be the wealthiest man in the world, then you're going to harm a lot of society. But if that doesn't matter to you, then it doesn't matter to me. It just depends, right?
Yeah.
But it is about having meaning and purpose, because I learned that trophies and my bank account's not that.
Yeah.
All right.
It's funny, like my whole life growing up, right? I had an old school dad, right?
Sure. Who didn't?
Yeah, right. And I know he loved me, and I know he loved me in his own way when I was growing up. I didn't understand a lot of the things then, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I got older, we had conversations and I understood things, right? But it's funny you talk about the trophies, like we won first place, right? Second place was the first loser, right?
Sure.
That was the
get
Vince
it.
Lombardi speech, right?
Right.
And then I moved away for work and all of those things.
But the thing is, right?
Yeah.
Is someone's going to lose.
Right.
So how do I become a great loser?
Or learn from it,
Right.
right? You know, and one of the things I found that was funny after you just touched on that was that when I moved away, all my trophies and everything that I had and I had gotten, MVP of this and, all these different things, they were in boxes in the garage.
Totally.
Right. And then when my dad was ready to purge and get rid of things, and he called me and was like, I'm like, Dad, I don't live there anymore. Like, I don't even live in the state. How am I going to get rid of them? He threw them all away. And honestly, that was something that I had to deal with. It was traumatic for me.
Sure.
Because
it was part of your self-definition.
Well, and it was something that he had told me.
But who doesn't want to impress their dad?
Right.
Right? Like, no one wants to disappoint their dad, and everyone never wants to hurt their mom. I don't care if you're Muslim, Christian, Republican, Democrat. I don't care what the label is. No one wants to do that. Once again, we're dealing with style and dynamics. For some other kid, it's soccer. For some other kid, it's badminton. For some other kid, but the thing is, it's like, the reason that it really hurt you is because you defined yourself based on the trophies.
I had some of my identity wrapped up in that. Right.
And look, I mean, that's, that is it's always a double-edged sword. As
I've gotten older, and even like when I'm going through and like purging things, right? Like, I feel like it's one of the things that I had to come to the realization of is that I couldn't have an attachment to the thing, right? Like, it was the achievement and the experience and what was getting there that I should hold on to and own, not what the representation of winning was, which was the trophy, right? There was the real trophy was what I gained from it that I took ownership of to move me forward as an individual, right?
Absolutely. And your dad was happy.
Right.
Okay. That's 300,000 years old.
Mhm.
All right. That's natural in us. That is natural in us, right? Completely natural in us. So the way I've looked at it is more effort than outcome, right? So my sons, they're both sharp kids. They're good boys, right?
Yeah.
When they don't do well on a test, I just know they didn't work hard enough because the education system's not that challenging in the first place, right?
Right.
So if you sit there for 3 hours a night and you do your work and you make a C, I'm good. I'm good. It's not about an A. It's not about an A at all, okay? Because a lot of times parents get affected by the way their kids are because it is a direct reflection of, oh, I'm not a good parent because, so they're more like, I'll give you an example, right? I'm in a airport maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. And there's this little girl who's surfing on the luggage belt, right? And my wife and I and two of our friends are just kind of giggling. And she's adorable. And she's surfing on the conveyor belt. And her mom's having a heart attack, right? To say that this girl probably surfed in the ocean, I'm sure she did. She looked perfect at this, right? So what's amazing, if it was our own son, we would have grabbed him and said, you're not supposed to do that. So why can we not see the child in our own children? Because we can't see the child in our own children is because we're concerned tribally about how everyone else is perceiving us as a parent. But the fact is they're making their representation of what that is based off what they've been domesticated, how they've been indoctrinated, and in a moment of time, right? So as it relates to my kids, I don't really care what the result is. I care what the effort is. That's it. Because if they can learn to put an effort into the things, like math comes easy for some people and it is really difficult for some people. I have one it comes easy to and one who doesn't come easy to, right?
So you get them help if they need it?
100%.
Right.
100%. So a tutor, I can't do it. I mean, I can't even do 6th grade math right now.
Right.
I mean, how's the education
I don't even
system?
know how they're teaching it anymore. Like we have a tutor for Addison too, right? So like same thing.
It is that, and it is the person's job to maybe potentially increase their passion about math. All right. I mean, how much of math are you ever going to use? Every single math thing that I would possibly use, I have someone who does it for me. Right. But it's not really about that. It's not really about, it's not like when you go to a gym, right? How much is the gym about performance? How much is it about vanity?
It depends on the individual.
Depends on the individual.
Right.
But if we just go to Gold's Gym today,
there's a lot of people that are looking at themselves in the mirror the whole time they're doing it.
So the interesting thing, right, is when I used to be a personal trainer and I worked at the Good Life gyms in Toronto, the biggest guys in there, and I mean, they're mountains, right? If I told them, you know, your lats look smaller than they did a month ago,
they lose their mind.
So what's crazy is that the insecurity has driven them to get to the point that they're so big that they actually can't fit on a plane or go through a door.
They need 2 seats, yeah.
And then kids sit there and look at it and think that's a big man. And I'm like, that big man looks in the mirror and sees a small man.
Perspective.
And just perception.
Yeah.
So the thing is, perception is based on reality, but as Buddhism addresses, reality is based in impermanence itself. So at the end of, you know, at the end of the day, the way that you look at it is like reality's constantly changing. So I think what happens in people who are trying to thrive is they're on different trajectories, right? So the rocket takes off. We've grown up in North America, right? All the commercials, all the movies we've seen, nice cars, nice houses, oceans, vacations. This is what we try to attain, okay? And it's not right or wrong, okay? But we're doing this. And so I think in capitalism, in the Western world, the first trajectory is success. Attaining things, nice watches, nice cars, we're all guilty of it, okay? But then you get to a point where you realize, like, that's not really the marrow of it all right? So if you're fortunate enough to get to the second trajectory, you then recognize less is more. You then recognize your health, your relationships. They become the most important.
Is that becoming more enlightened or so to speak?
Of course,
yeah.
Right? I mean, you don't have to tell a baby or a toddler that that's everything in life is family, and you don't.
Mm-hmm.
But we just get corrupted along the way
Mm-hmm.
because we sue the system, right? The system is in place, all right? So is that system in place so that I have my best life? Probably not, right? It's so that the system works the way that it works. So I think something that hit me really, really heavy was some years ago, I coached a CEO and he passed away. And I went to his funeral and there was 8 people there, right? And then the janitor of my high school passed away and they had to put speakers in the parking lot. That was it for me, you know? Like I've always been kind of this way, but you know, but I was lucky. Like I was domesticated by somebody who never walked past a homeless person without helping them, who taught me about Mandela and Dr. King and Mother Teresa. It's no mistake that I'm this way, right?
Again, you were indoctrinated that way.
I was indoctrinated towards love and the fact that we're all the same. Okay. Somebody else has been indoctrinated that they're superior, that everyone else is inferior. All right. I think I know where that ends up. That person's going to have a less abundant experience than I am. Because the thing about belief systems that we have to be very careful, I try and not have belief systems. Because if life is inside out, then I'm projecting my belief outwardly. So if I look across the street and see somebody that media has deliberately explained to me that this person is lesser than, until I'm able to really meet many people from that group, I'm going to see it as I believe it to be.
Right.
So I don't want to have belief systems because if I'm projecting my perception onto the world, right? So I grew up in Toronto, most multicultural, diverse city in the world, right? If somebody says the word to me instantly, right? And they've done this with brain scans and it's all really fascinating. It's the measurements are there. We know what's happening, right? We're not guessing. They say Muslim. I'm going to think about those ladies with the hijabs who were the nicest people I've ever met. But I got a buddy whose brother died in 9/11 in Tower 2. He doesn't have the same interpretation. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the fact is, Muslim people have no chance versus his belief system.
Right.
Until we put him in a room or we send him on a vacation for a month with only Muslim people. And within a very short time, he's going to realize that they're not that way. I mean, what's the percentage mathematically that somebody who's Muslim is a terrorist? It's 0.000000000 infinitely to 1. So guess what the chances are? 0. Okay? But the thing is, if that's all that's you've been hammered by, right?
I mean, the brain remembers things on spaced repetition, right? It's just, that's why marketing.
And then fear is money.
Well, and that's why marketing works, right? We call soda Coke now because there's commercials. You see it in magazines, you see billboards, you see the trucks on the road, right? It's subliminal bombs that get dropped on us on a regular basis.
As a kid.
Right.
We would go to McDonald's once a month and I would be like so pumped, right?
Right.
Now when I think about McDonald's, I couldn't eat it because 1, it's not food. 2, it's fast food is absolutely electrifying autoimmune disorders. But I didn't know that when I was 10.
Right. Actually, a big thing that I wanted to come back to that you talked about, which was Man's Search for Meaning with Viktor Frankl. Like, I think one of the biggest things that I took away from that, it to piggyback off of your points that you were just making, is that from that book, I think what hit me home more than anything else was we're not who we are by the situations we're put in, but by the choices we make in those situations.
100%.
Right. And I think that leads back to a lot of what we were talking about with, the cerebral or mental performance and physical performance. Right. And I know that with a lot of what you do, right, you tie in the biomechanics of the body with the mental, and there's this connection, right, with, between the mind, body, and all those things. How can somebody that's not like, people listening that are not golfers, like how can they take something like that? Like, you're big on data, right? And utilizing that data for optimization and moving forward and learning, right? in
Well,
regular life, how can somebody apply that?
But that's also just to offset my belief system. So in golf forever,
Right.
the saying was drive for show, putt for dough.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you look at the
Did Hogan say that? Is that what I can't remember who said that?
I don't remember,
Yeah,
but they almost still say it today.
Yeah. I mean, it's something my dad reiterated on a regular basis on the golf course.
If you take the top 5 drivers in the world,
Yeah.
they average about 14th in the world ranking. If you take the top 5 putters, they average around 65th. That's where data is important, because data is the thing that decodes the belief systems that we have. So if I think drive for show, putt for dough, then I'm going to be putting all the time. Okay. If I understand the data, I'm going to focus on my driver. I'm going to focus on my athletic ability. I'm going to focus on my sleep cycles. I'm going to focus on anything that's going to allow me to swing the club faster. Right. So the idea is, like, if a guy is in the belief, like as a player, a drive for show, putt for dough is a real thing, he's not going to ever really get to the highest level he can because his belief system's wrong. So as it relates to data and measurement and other types of things, I did a thing a couple weeks ago with First Horizon Bank, speaking about performance, and the lady, it was all high net wealth people that they have in the bank, right? It's in St. Petersburg. And they brought in the bank's economist to come up 45 minutes before and give a speech. And it was all metrics. Okay. So the economy's not as good as the Democrats say, and it's way better than the Republicans do. Okay. Inflation's not caused by a man or a group of people. It was caused by 1 million variables. Okay. So what's really important is there's that much information out there. You can easily just go into the Federal Reserve. You can go into any different type of data-based internet site that will tell you exactly where things are, right? Exactly where things are.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's imperative, because I want to know exactly what things are, because if all I do is watch CNN one day, I'm going to believe in something that's not true. If all I do is watch Fox, it's going to be the same thing. So if I want to understand economics better, then why not go to the top economic people and read their books?
Right.
Right? When like, for example, someone said to me 3 weeks ago, well, how are you going to end poverty? And I'm like, well, Jeffrey Sachs, who's a Nobel Prize winning economist, wrote a book called The End to Poverty. It's quite simple. It's actually quite simple in the math of how you would do it. It's just the fact that, are we loving enough as a society to actually do that? Right.
Well, that we hopefully can get to a point. I part of the reason why I'm doing this now, right, is like I let go of the belief of one person can't make a difference.
Of
Right?
course.
Like that's one of those things that, like, well, who am I, or what, I'm not that important. Right.
But
like,
who you are is everybody else. Everybody else who felt like they disappointed their dad. Everybody who feels like they're not present enough as a father and a husband. Who's not doing that?
Yeah.
Like, we're all, like, that's what I'm trying to explain to people. We turn on TV and all they do is address the division that we have. It is not true. It's just purely not true.
So what are some of the specifics that you would work with somebody on, right, currently, where, they're under, like you said, you try not to listen to the noise, right? Like,
no, I just know it's noise.
Yeah. And so how do you help somebody realize that, right? Because they're under, intense scrutiny anytime you're involved in the media, that's going to happen, right? And some people will say, well, that's what they signed up for. Yeah, but they wanted to be the best they could at golf, right? And it just so happens that when you get to the pro level, you're going to be on television and more exposed, right? So how do you work with somebody on getting to that point where they understand it's just noise? Like, again, like, I've been around when you've been coaching people in the past, right? And I understand, you have to try to meet people where they are, right? So that you can relate to them, and give them examples that are relevant. But what are some steps that somebody, like, at home could take to like understand that and then move forward past something?
I was a punching bag during my time with Tiger Woods. Okay. And I started with Tiger almost 10 months after his life fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All the allegations, the divorce, custody issues, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. At first, the criticism took me back a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But what I had to tap into was the fact that I was responsible for all of it. I was responsible. I took a job with the most famous person in the world
Mm-hmm.
after a divorce, after it's showing us that he doesn't have life figured out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He's been injured many times.
Mm-hmm.
And then I, in my mind, thought that I was going to be able to bring him to a level he hadn't been at before. That's arrogance. That's ego.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what I realized at one point is all I had to do to avoid the criticism was just say no to the job. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But because I was so inflated in my ego at that time, I thought, man, no matter whatever I touch turns to gold, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what I recognize is that I take full responsibility for that criticism, because that person criticizing me on television is trying to send their kids to college too.
Mm-hmm.
Of all the people who criticize me, how many of them have I ever had a coffee with? Not one of them. So how can I take that personally?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this person is trying to get clicks, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
what's new about like before the internet versus now,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, we used to release dopamine in anticipation of success. Now we get dopamine released to us when we get a heart of a picture that we edited to look different.
Right. Image crafting.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like that. You want to talk about de-evolution.
Mm-hmm.
We used to release dopamine when we failed to keep us pushing through so we would keep hunting. And now we get it for nothing at all. That's a problem.
They've re-exchanged what their survival is. It's a more hollow survival that way, right?
The survival is being accepted by an audience of people who've never met me, have no idea what I've been through, and who really won't. I mean, what's America great at? We're great at lifting our heroes up, but we're also great at removing the rug and watching them at terminal velocity hit the ground. Right?
Right.
It's different being Canadian. In Canada, we want to put a bet on the horse after the race is over. Right? So it's, you know what I mean? We're a society of like who say sorry when we haven't even been done anything wrong.
Right.
Right? Sorry. And I'll take that as like a net default over people who don't care. But, you know, I think that for people, I think they have to deeply define like why they do what they do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if we ask so many doctors, right now we went to a hospital, why are you a doctor? What percentage of them are going to say, I find biology incredibly fascinating. It's the love of my life. There'll be some.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand to see people hurt and in pain.
Mm-hmm.
Or, well, my dad was a doctor. My mom was a doctor. Ever since I was 10, they said I was going to be a doctor. That's probably a majority.
Yeah. And we talked about that earlier, the ones that care, right? Like what I was saying is I feel like when you're talking about physicians in general, for me, you know, I think you're the same way, right? And a like attracts like, I believe that wholeheartedly.
Well,
it's
opposites don't. In physics, opposites do not attract.
Right.
It's not. So, it doesn't actually happen.
One of the things about me, and I know this about you, and I feel like this is again one of those things that makes a good doctor great, is that my passion at the end of the day is not medical aesthetics or the things that I do. It's helping people.
Of course.
Right? Like that's what when I hit the ground in the morning and my feet hit the floor. It's people I work with, people that I get to work for, right? Helping people is what brings me joy, that increases my dopamine, right? You know, that's my sort of measure for success. Have I helped somebody and have I impacted them in a positive way, right? Or in a way that moves them forward, right? We've spent a lot of time talking about the mental side, which is a huge piece, right? Physically, right? Again, with the younger stable now, right? And with the game, you know, again, if guys are playing well or girls are playing well, they're hitting balls every day. They're staying physically fit. They're monitoring nutrition now. They're also, it is taxing, you know, with the travel, as well as if you're playing well, you're playing Thursday for the men, Thursday,
the whole week.
Thursday through Sunday, and then our Friday through Sunday for the women, right? So what are like how does that evolve throughout your career now with the physical, right? Like there's like, how do you help incorporate the diet, the nutrition, the exercise? Like how do you create a schedule for that, for your athletes and for yourself, because you're dealing with it on a different level?
Yeah. So, I mean, once again, it comes down to the fact that, we are unique slightly.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some people who need to eat or their mood is affected.
Mm-hmm.
I can probably live off of less food than anyone you've ever met.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think that should be the default. Okay. If you look at our ancestors, we didn't really get to pick and choose when we ate.
Mm-hmm.
The food industry is a huge industry. All right. Trillions of dollars. So the idea growing up I remember my friends thinking like that their family wasn't normal because they didn't have breakfast at 7 together and at noon and at 6 at night. But see, like that to me is just more marketing than anything realistic,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It's like the food groups.
Yeah.
You know?
Just shit. You could go on forever, right? You can go on forever about that. But I think getting blood work done is mandatory
Mm-hmm.
because for somebody, red meat could be imperative, but for somebody else, it might not be,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if you looked at the Indian population, red meat's probably not imperative
Mm-hmm.
because the cow's been sacred,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So they might have a allergy to that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're doing blood work to assess that.
Mm-hmm.
For somebody, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, all those great things could actually be bad for them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a blueberry smoothie is, yes, it's full of antioxidants. It's full of great things. But if your gut reacts to it in a poor way, that's not good for you either.
Yeah.
So it once again, if you asked me 20 years ago what the key to nutrition was, the answer is much different now.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the keys in life is that when you were wrong, address it and try to become correct.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, like my son always makes fun of me because I'm on Webster's dictionary all day on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
It's because as soon as I hear a word that I don't understand, I have to look up the definition. I just cannot not do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been very helpful to me.
Well, I almost feel like that was, again, I had an old school father, and I was more of a disciplinarian, and
That's as it should be.
well, and I said in his eulogy, right? I said, if I can instill 50% of the disciplines that my father instilled in me and my daughter, I'm winning, right? Because of what I see around now, right? But that was the thing that my parents always said that we need to do. If we didn't understand something, look it up.
But the
right?
problem is now we got a generation of parents who are trying to be friends with their kids. That ain't it. That ain't it.
Right.
That's just not it.
We're again, you're a coach, and you're also a parent. There's a lot of similarities there.
So
right?
but the thing is that the main similarity is that both my players and my children are watching my example. They're not listening to what I'm telling them at all, right? Like you can tell your kid, "Hey, when you get your license, you better not text in your car." And then you're texting in your car.
Right.
I'm fucking responsible for all of it.
I know.
Right?
Right.
I mean, where did I get to the point?
So we can't have a double standard.
Yeah, but that's it. So the thing is like what happens is the frequency or the energy of the behavior isn't then adopted by the other because they're just listening to you, right? They're just listening to you, right? So, I mean, the idea that the Ku Klux Klan were made up of Southern Baptists, where in Jesus's message has it anything to do with that, right?
It's man's construction.
You think Jesus would have an issue with gay people? No, wouldn't have an issue with anybody. Wash the feet of the poor. Was all about love and equality. Was all about forgiveness. I don't hear that when I go to church with my friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it, like I'm saying, is get to the atomic level of what things are. So as it comes to health at the highest level, get your blood work done, see what you're allergic to and what you're not allergic to. Now, I don't mean allergic like you're going to sneeze, but your microbiome, your gut isn't going to operate the way that it needs to. A large portion of our immune system is in our gut. The microbiome is like one of the new talking spaces.
Well, Huberman talks about that too. Like, really, nobody should drink because what it does more than anything else is it wreaks havoc on your biome.
It's
right?
a toxin.
Yeah.
It's a toxin.
Yeah.
Now, it is a toxin. All right. But if the quality of your life comes from communication and friendships, and you guys get together on Friday and Saturday and have drinks and mingle, what's that then?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm worried about the duration of my life. I'm worried about the quality of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like it's funny to watch human beings react when somebody says, yeah, my grandfather passed away, and people go, oh, how old was he? Right? Oh, he was 90. Oh, well, he lived a good long life. Well, he was depressed for the last 30.
Yeah.
Right. But it's amazing how we protect ourselves from the uncomfort of the discussion of like your family member passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And then we say, oh, they're 90. So our belief system is related to the fact that a long life is a good life. I just think that if you don't have it figured out, that just sounds like more time to suffer.
I know. And like what you said about the blood work too, right? To me, like that was one of the things that I found when I was on the road. I was thinking I was eating healthy, right? And I was still having issues with my stomach. And I like kept going to, an internist, and they kept saying, there's nothing wrong with me. They would put me under, and they're saying there was nothing wrong with me. Come to find out that, I thought I was being healthy on the road, eating raw almonds, pistachios. Those were inflammatory for me, right? So data is critical, right? Some of the things that
100%.
One of the things that, we're friends, but I also got to bring in what I do for a living with something like that you were trying to work on, right? You, for a long time, you were having difficulty just being able to work out. And part of your job is being on your feet on a regular basis.
Nonstop.
You're right. We started treating you with the AccuFit device, right? And we did above and below your knee because you were having like holding fluid in your knee problems, right? And again, like you looked at all these things, the data, like, you're somebody that enjoys a Heineken on a regular, fairly regular basis.
Yeah,
Are used to,
I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
Before when you're born, before they give you your mother's breast, you get a quick beer in there first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you did. And again, we talked about it for the social aspect, right? There's no harm in it. From that perspective, again, if you're looking at things from a pure data perspective, it does what it does to you, right?
100%.
And that was something that was just a regular part of what you did. But that again, understanding that this is something that is not going to be beneficial for you, stop doing it. You stopped doing it, right?
But so the thing is like, once again, this brings us back to like the discussion of like knowing of what is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so forever I was diagnosed with this osteoarthritis,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like it was a severe osteoarthritis, very unique,
Mm-hmm.
which means it probably wasn't it,
Mm-hmm.
because osteoarthritis is pretty much osteoarthritis.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up being an effect of gout and rheumatoid arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, when I use the AccuFit
Mm-hmm.
device to quickly increase hypertrophy in my quad and calf,
Mm-hmm.
the problem is, as long as there's fluid in my knee, those babies are going to shut off.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to the point where I probably had the leg strength of a baby. And so
you were noticeable. Remember the circumference of that calf, for sure.
Of course.
Yeah.
So then, now I have to go through airports all week, walk golf courses all day. And my knee always didn't feel healthy. Well, I didn't have a calf to toe off, and I didn't have a quad,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't have a glute or a hamstring.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the idea, because I've been around a lot of sports doctors,
Mm-hmm.
I obviously knew the positive effects of using STEM
Mm-hmm.
and being able to electrically get input into the muscles so that it's firing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then the AccuFoot system is that on steroids, to where it really has the ability to hypertrophy at ridiculous levels based on the technology.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always another level.
Right.
So once I finally understood, after all this time, with people telling me, they got to the point where when I decided to go and get a scope done on my knee,
Mm-hmm.
my doctor said, look, at this point, I think it's in your head.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, I obviously went and did the scope. We realized it wasn't in my head. It was in my knee.
Right.
We realized that I had been failed by many, many health experts
Mm-hmm.
on what it was, to then find out what it was and address it with them and then go, you know what? I had an idea. I thought years ago it could be that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thanks now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks now.
Thanks,
Yeah,
right?
Right.
So it's, once I understood that and what it was, then it was a lot easier, right? So I got a friend whose dad smokes 3 packs of cigarettes a day, has forever, right? It's almost like lit the whole day. Had a stroke, sat in the hospital bed, realized that he wanted to see his grandchildren,
Mm-hmm.
and quit instantly and hasn't even thought about it again. He's not jonesing.
Mm-hmm.
He's not wanting to have it. He even still has beers,
Mm-hmm.
which preceded the smoke.
Mm-hmm.
So remember, it's not so much those things, it's the habit.
And it's the conditioning.
It's the conditioning.
Yeah.
So, my mom smokes,
Mm-hmm.
and she's got this little garden in her backyard,
Mm-hmm.
and it's her little Zen place, right? Her ashtray's in one place. She sits cross-legged. Her smoke is in one hand.
Mm-hmm.
So when I made her go outside, smoke in the other hand and stare at the wall standing right next to the brick, she didn't enjoy it at all. So it wasn't really the cigarette. It wasn't really the beer. It wasn't really the Big Mac. It wasn't really the ice cream. It's not that. It's the habit.
Mm-hmm.
That obviously was her time where she could block out the world and have 8 minutes to herself and just, so it's not even the thing itself.
You hear that so often, right? When people quit smoking, it like the hardest thing was like not doing it after they ate or when they got in the car.
Or when they were with their friends.
Right.
Or when they were with this. Or
Right.
when they were with that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's more about the conditioning of the habit and the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Than it was the thing itself.
Yeah.
Like, of course, we know that nicotine is addictive, and this is, dude, the nicotine system we have. Of course we are, right? We are already looking at studies on NAD.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is one of the major aspects of that? It's the nicotine system.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, for people that haven't thought about this stuff a lot, it might seem like a lot, but the beauty of the internet today is that the availability to this information, you can get it pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you type into AI or Google or whatever, what are the 10 most imperative things for a human being to be healthy?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's really right there.
Do you think AI helps sift through the minutia, or is it just gathering a big?
I don't know. I don't
compendium.
I don't really try to talk what I don't have a lot of knowledge about.
Yeah.
And the whole AI world to me
It's
is
still,
like,
yeah. I mean, I'm very interested, but it's still.
I'm not even interested.
Yeah.
It's just like, that wasn't my.
Yeah.
I was more into philosophers and more into stuff than I was into science.
That's funny you say that, because that's one of the things that Steve Jobs said like a long time ago about what, he was talking about Aristotle, right? And he said at some point we'll be able to have computers evolve to where we can have a conversation with Aristotle. And that's what some people are likening what AI is now, right? Is that like, tapping into what an Aristotle's response would be to a question, right?
Yeah, and I think that's great, but like, it's in the book,
Right.
The
data is there that it's pulling it from.
Yeah.
You can find that data without AI. You have to just find the source.
And so sometimes though, the thing is that struggle is a 1-to-1 ratio on being able to achieve something too.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's happening in schools where kids are having AI rate an essay.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Well, they might make a good mark, but they didn't really learn anything.
No, they didn't learn anything. That's what the problem is.
But the main, but then if you look at how the problem manifests itself, it starts by this pressure that you have to go to a good college to get a good job, to have a nice car, to have the white picket fence, to da-da-da-da-da. So it all starts there, right? To then, in most cases, attaining all of that and realizing that holding hands with your daughter during the sunset is the most wealthy thing you've ever done in your life.
So so again, in your mind's eye, right? That's what people should do if they're trying to correct or fix it, is just make sure that the message is that the time is the important part, not the achievement or working towards something. So how does one try to set a standard for that for their kid as they're bringing them up then?
I think there's this Tibetan meditation that's called I don't remember the exact name, but it's called the death meditation.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And it was the monks meditating on dying
Mm-hmm.
to give them a deeper understanding of how they wanted to live. Okay. So in the last week of my life, all right, who knows when that is?
Mm-hmm.
All right. But say it's standard society 84.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What am I going to reflect on? All right. So at 50 years old, right? So I got 35 years left, or I have 1,800 weeks. 1,800 weeks doesn't sound like a whole hell of a lot of time. It sounds less than 35 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like Quinn is a junior.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 2 years left with him. No, we have 89 weeks. And then he's gone
Mm-hmm.
for most of the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So am I willing to see my business decline right now, knowing that it could affect the time with Quinn? I could be working way more than I am right now. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to, because I already know what that leads to. Okay. And
Mhm.
I'm not saying that in this world, you don't want to get to the point where you don't want to think about money.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you do. The world is it's expenditure based.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen that in my best year financially was my worst year personally. So I already know that's not the solution. Okay. I want to know when he leaves that I can look in the mirror and say, you know what? You did the best you could as a father.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You've tried to educate him on how to deal with the lions and the hyenas. And then we'll be in communication often, even if he doesn't want to be on the phone. Right.
Right. Because that's the challenge now with this age. I mean, you know, Addison's a freshman, but it's like they wanted to spend time with us more when they were younger. And now, like, we have to find a way to, at least I am.
We call it forced family fun.
Right. Yes. Right. It's
Forced family fun. But I think that
because that time is getting shorter and shorter. Right.
But pretty much if I look at my life to this point, right, when I sit there in that last week, I will reflect on all the books I've read, all the brilliant people or interesting or loving people I've met, golf, a major passion of mine is hip hop,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
right? And that's not what you hear on the radio,
No.
but real hip
Real
hop,
hip-hop.
authentic hip hop,
Mhm.
right? That's what I'm going to focus on. Now, in that last week, not who's coming to my funeral, but who's coming to my house to say goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I kind of already know who that is. Now, some people that I think will be there might not be, and some people I haven't met yet will be there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not many people. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not in the room that week, if you think I'm great or shit, it will have no effect on me. All right. And if I already know what I'm probably going to reflect on, then why would I not just focus on that for the next 35 years of my life? Because that's where I feel abundant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why hip hop gripped me the way that it does. I don't know why, if I'm not doing something, I have headphones on. I don't know why, but I just know how much I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm 35 years out from when I leave this vestibule and I already know what I'm going to focus on, then that's it. Like that's knowing. You can go into a gym and you can do some bicep curls. You can do some tricep extensions.
Mm-hmm.
You can do some squats. If you really, really, really want to improve, you have to structure it. And that structure will come to sleep, recovery, the time you work out at, the caloric load that you have before you work out. I mean, you can get it to where it's really, 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 and that's really the goal,
Mm-hmm.
is that everyone wants to improve. They just don't know how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is we then create a lot of books that are just very bland and very simple with great titles and think that it's going to be something easy. Look, all of this is difficult,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to understand that. And the difficulty is part of what I think adds to the beauty of it all, is that it is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard to get to the point that you wake up excited about your day and you fall asleep at peace with what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
But it's possible.
It is. And again, like you said, it's effort, right? It
is effort.
It takes investing, like you were talking about mental wealth. I love that. You know, your work with like TrackMan and 3D imaging has, you know, I would say transformed golf in a lot of ways, right? You now have a tool that I know you're proud of, that is something that you're promoting now. Tell us a little bit more about that, ProSENDR.
Well, yeah, just for, for the non-golfers and stuff, TrackMan came along in 2008, and it was a radar that you would put behind the golf ball, and then when the ball was hit, it would track the ball the whole time. All right. Then it would give you the information of what occurred at impact. All right. So we weren't guessing anymore. Right. We weren't guessing. It was like, oh, that's this. Now, it made it slightly easier to address it and improve it, but that's still tricky. Right. But at least
and you're getting more data, to the point of where you can look at things holistically.
But golf really pushed back on me during that time. But the same people who push back on me would never let someone operate on them without them seeing an MRI. Look, I've been a doctor for 30 years. I'm really good at it. This feels to me like it's this. So I'm going to cut here and do this. No one's doing that. Not even the best doctor in the world. They're never going to say anything without an image. Because things can be like anything else. Yeah. Right? I mean, a heart attack and indigestion probably feel the same the person going through it. But so what, are you going to send the guy home having a heart attack because you think he's got indigestion? So in golf, that has occurred. 3D biomechanics was basically us measuring the golf swing and it giving us graphs on velocities, torques, and all these things. And then the physiology of deeply understanding, mechanics of the human body, right? And we're all different, but not that different. And so basically, most people playing golf are not my tour players. All right. That's like the 0.00001%. Right. So when I looked at professional golfers versus amateurs, of course, the amount of time they do it, the amount of opportunity they have, but to put those aside, technically speaking, what were the major kind of, where the alarms go off? It is the angle of the right wrist, the amount of bend in the right arm, and the amount of turn in the body. It's right there. All right. So
those are all key points.
Those exploded.
Yeah.
So we saw amateurs shifting their weight. We saw amateurs turning. We saw amateurs extending. We saw amateurs creating velocity. But the things that really stood out were pros average 51 degrees of right wrist extension. Okay. Their right arm never gets even fully bent to 90, and they turn a ton through the pelvis. Okay.
So they're generating their power with their pelvis turn. Well, it's all power, right?
The thing is, the velocity comes from the hands and arms, but the power comes from us creating friction against the ground and then being able to generate force with our muscles and then being able to generate elastic energy from our fascial slings and. But it is, look, we're holding on to a fairly light object with our hands. This is the CEO all day, every day. All right. So amateurs were around 12 to 24 degrees of right wrist extension with a lot more elbow bend. So at impact, if you look at a player, the right wrist is still slightly bent and the right arm is long. So when I get to the top, if my wrist is bent in flexion and not extension and my right arm is bent, the idea that all amateurs are over the top, that's the consequence of this.
Well, you're casting to make up for it, right?
You have to.
Yeah.
All the pros are casting. How's the thing going to speed up if I don't apply a force to it? So remember, force precedes motion.
Right.
So when we see something moving, something administered the movement, and that's just force. So the ProSENDR is built to 51 degrees that you actually have to do it yourself. It's not something that you put on and it just puts you there. If that's the case, then you won't be learning because there's no effort. So, that the ProSENDR has been fantastic. Wherever I go, I get from airports to gas stations, people come up to me and say, man, I got the ProSENDR. It really helps. I've never done a training aid in my whole career.
No, you haven't.
I've turned down so much money to be the face of a training aid. But to me, knowing again what I learned when I made the most money, that wasn't it. I'm not going to put my face next to something that I know is useless just to earn more of things that aren't going to pay. Like, think about it. Sunlight, sleep, hydration, family, or love, exercise are all technically free. And so if the best things in life are free, then what am I willing to do to get the things that aren't the best things in life? And will they diminish the best things? You know, that's a very simple way to kind of organize it and think about it.
I agree. Well, Sean, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. I hope everyone else enjoyed the conversation. I know I'm blessed and lucky to have Sean as a friend, so I get to have conversations like this on a regular basis. Again, thank you all for joining us today. I can't thank you enough, Sean. I appreciate you. And remember to like, share, and subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, I'm Paul Fulford, and this was Optimized Outcomes.